Today I'm going to talk about 5 things I stopped doing in my 50s, and boy do I wish I had stopped them sooner. Do you remember the movie Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts? In that movie, she often goes out to breakfast with her boyfriend/fiancé, and when they order, she always orders her eggs the same way that her boyfriend does. And later in the movie we see a clip of her cooking eggs all different ways: Benedict, scrambled, over easy. And Richard Gere asks her, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm figuring out how I like my eggs." Well, Julia, at the beginning of that movie, was a people pleaser, and I've spent most of my life as a people pleaser. And I think it's really common for women in my generation and even our mother's generation, because kids in our generation were told to be seen and not heard, and in theirs as well. And you just were not supposed to be a bother to anyone. And I know this is cliche, but I also didn't have a relationship with my dad after he and my mom divorced, because he just apparently couldn't be bothered. And then he remarried and she had kids, and that became his family, and we were left behind, which left me with a whole host of issues around abandonment and self-worth. And if I'd been better, he wouldn't have left, or he at least would have wanted to maintain a relationship with me. And so therefore I made it my job to make sure that nobody was ever disappointed in me, which is exhausting and completely impossible. And it took a long time and 2 years of therapy in 2012 for me to be able to start healing some of that. And so I have finally gotten to the point where I don't feel like I have to remake myself into the image of what I think people want me to be. And I had many different images of myself depending on who I was relating to and what I thought they needed or wanted from me. And now I feel like I get to just be me. Another thing I stopped doing was taking on the responsibility for everyone's comfort and happiness. As moms, I think it's kind of natural and required that we take the responsibility for the well-being and happiness and comfort of our children. But it can be a little difficult to let go of that role as they grow. And it can become such a habit of doing that we start taking that on for other people around us that we should not be doing that for. And this looks like being at a family gathering and checking in on everyone and making sure they have the food they need, they have something to drink, that there is conversation that they're interested in, that there are games to play that they want to play. Yes, some of this is good hospitality, but this goes beyond that in feeling that you personally are responsible for everyone around you to be happy, to be cared for, to be comfortable at all times. And not only is that exhausting, it's impossible. And so what I stopped doing in my 50s was thinking that I was responsible for the health, happiness, and well-being of everyone around me. Does anybody else find that saying no is hard, like really, really hard? I had a hard time saying no through most of my life. It goes back to that people-pleasing thing, because if I said no, then someone might be unhappy with me. And if I did say no, I always felt like I had to have a valid excuse. So the third thing I stopped in my 50s was saying yes to everything. I learned how to say no, and how to say no and then not have to follow up with an excuse. No, I can't do that. No, that's not going to work for me. Or just, no. And it was very difficult, but it's also incredibly freeing. And learning to say no helped me to feel less taken advantage of. Even though people weren't intentionally taking advantage of me, I was letting them. And so by being able to say no, I regained a sense of control and power over my time and my schedule. And it freed up time to be able to say yes to things that I was not able to say yes to before because I was so busy with all of these other little things. Do you guys remember this playground toy? Oh my gosh, we had so much fun on that, and you got so dizzy and felt so sick. And sometimes you get slung off and end up in the gravel, and sometimes you were the one pushing and you couldn't keep up and you'd end up face first in the gravel. Oh, good times. When I was younger, I would often have conversations with myself that began with, you should. You should garden. You should be more outdoorsy. You should eat better. You should exercise. When I was a homeschool mom, you should do more exciting unit studies with your kids. So many shoulds. The kids are having so much fun over on the playground. And so in my 50s, I decided to stop shoulding on myself and instead accept the parts of me that didn't want to do those things. I don't like to garden. I'm not an outdoorsy kind of person. I did not have the planning skills to make unit studies work the way they're supposed to. And you know what? All 4 of my kids have graduated from our homeschool, and they're all fully functioning, happy adults. So I've tried to stop shoulding on myself and reframe that into things that I want to do, which means I have to examine them and see if they really are things that I want to do. And then to look at my motivation of why. Because yes, I want to exercise, I want to eat well. And my why for that is because I want to be around for my kids and my grandkids. I want to be able to get down on the floor and play with them and get up off the floor. And so there isn't a should there, there's a want to. Now, I'm still having trouble making it happen, but I'm working on it. The thing is, when there's a should, then when it doesn't happen, there's guilt. Because if you should be doing something and you're not, well, you're letting someone down, or you aren't living up to an expectation. And if you go back to number 1, that people-pleasing thing, letting people down and not living up to their expectations is a huge part that plays into being a people pleaser. Honestly, most of these are related. So number 4 was I stopped shoulding on myself. And the final thing that I quit in my 50s was being afraid to make mistakes. Sometimes I get to thinking about this stuff and I think, man, I was a mess. And I kind of was. There are a whole bundle of personality traits that I started to unpack with my therapist back in 2012. I saw her for 2 years. It was the best thing I've ever done for myself. And I find myself still learning about things that are related to a lot of that childhood. And I'm going to go ahead and call it trauma because it was trauma. And it shaped every relationship that I've ever had in my life. Fortunately, going to therapy has helped me reshape a lot of those relationships in much healthier ways. But being afraid to make mistakes is all part of that perfectionism and people-pleasing and wanting to be what people expected me to be, even though they didn't tell me they expected me to be that. It's what I assumed they expected me to be. Like I said, messed up. But it can get to be rather paralyzing when you're afraid to make a mistake, because if you're afraid to make a mistake, then you're not going to try very many new things, because we all make lots of mistakes when we try new things. And so you're going to end up kind of stuck just doing the same old thing over and over and over because you feel comfortable with it. You know how to do it and you know how to do it well. But being willing to make mistakes and admit that you made them is so freeing. I've got posters out there right now for my job that I proved that have a mistake on them. And you know what? I took a Sharpie and I fixed it, and it's okay. And there have been other times that I've made mistakes in my job and I needed someone else to help me fix it. And I just said, hey, I messed this up. Can you help me? And they said, sure. They weren't mad at me. They didn't think I was a worthless human being. And I learned something. And so being able to make mistakes, admit your mistakes, laugh at those mistakes, and that realizing maybe they make me a little more relatable and a little more human. I was one of those kids that was always accused of being stuck up because I was really, really shy, and I was also really, really afraid of making mistakes. And so I held myself back and I held myself kind of aloof, and I didn't know how to make friends and I didn't know how to approach people. And so I came across as unapproachable myself. I know that quitting these 5 things in my 50s has made my life easier. And I just wonder if I had felt a little freer to be myself, if maybe I would have had a little easier time with friends growing up. I have recently discovered Maggie with Perspectacles over on IG. I will have her IG account listed down in my description box. She is a trauma therapist and she focuses on good kid rehab. And I have since found that all of these traits that I just described are part of being the good kid. And I'm going to explore that more in other videos, what that meant to me in my life, and maybe what that might have meant to you. If you recognized yourself in some of those 5 things that I shared, then maybe go over to Maggie's channel and scroll through and see if you see yourself in any of the things that she's talking about. And this is going to maybe get a little out there, but one thing I appreciate about Maggie is she's doing a lot of the things that I did with my therapist and reaching out to that child that was abandoned or scared or felt worthless or whatever, and letting that part of you know that it's okay now, that they're safe, that you are taking care of them. You don't have to continue these behaviors to make sure that nobody's ever mad at you or nobody's ever disappointed in you, that nobody ever leaves you, because even if those things happen, you're going to be okay. Okay, I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to leave in. I've been wanting to dig deeper into this subject of being the good kid and people pleasing and perfectionism and that kind of stuff. And I'm seeing that it's all part of the same ball. It's all sections of the same pie, or whatever analogies you want to use. And it's hard to get into one aspect of it without getting into all of it. And then it becomes big and cumbersome and hard to talk about. And so I'm gonna leave it here, but I do want to get into it more in future videos. So if that's content that you're interested in seeing more about, then please let me know down in the comments, and also subscribe so that you're here for it when it happens. I did another video like this, kind of just sitting and chatting about why it's hard to start new things in our 50s, and I will put that one right there if you want to go watch it. I hope you have a beautiful, blessed day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.